Good evening. I'd like to call the February 19th, 2020 board meeting to order and remind everyone to please use your microphones when you're speaking and turn them off when you've finished. Thank you. Commissioners present tonight, starting on my left, Commissioner Doan, Commissioner Duggan, and to my right, Commissioner Sanders, Commissioner Schmidt, and myself, Commissioner Bagnall. Now we will turn to the reports by the CEO and the management staff.
Thank you. So wanted to report on some Portland cryptosporidium results. Portland Water Bureau reported that a total of 11 cryptosporidium oocysts were detected in select water samples collected from the Bull Run headworks between January 12th and February 12th. The state has determined that the public does not need to take additional protections at this time. Portland Water Bureau will continue increased sampling 4 times per week until we have at least 3 weeks without any detections. Complete results of Portland's cryptosporidium monitoring are posted on the Water Bureau's website. I wanted to update you on HB 4043. This is the legislation associated with plastic pipe. As I announced last week in our Thursday memo, HB 4043 has been pulled from any further legislative action this session. However, this week we've been informed that a work group will be formed to discuss this issue further and being considered for the next legislative session. We have let Mark Landauer from SDAO know that TVWD is interested in participating in this work group. So more to come on that. We also wanted to notify the board that we were recipient of a budget award from the GFOA. Tualatin Valley Water District recently received the Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. The prestigious national honor was earned for TVWD's outstanding presentation of its 2019-2021 biennial budget. The award reflects TVWD's commitment to meeting the highest standards of governmental budgeting and the desire to make the budget understandable to all customers. It is based on how well the budget document serves as a policy document, a financial plan, an operations guide, and a communications device. And I have to say, coming from another agency, I really am impressed with our budget and how readable it is. And I've let our finance people know it really is award worthy.
Excuse me, meeting tomorrow.
I'm sorry?
If the budget comes up, we have an award for how good ours is.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Yes. Thank you. I was a little slow there. Thank you. We also want to let you know about a communications award we received from AWWA Pacific Northwest Section Communications Award. TVWD earned an AWWA Pacific Northwest Section Excellence in Communications Award for the new TVWD website. There will be an opportunity to present on the award at the section conference in Spokane this spring. So for those of you attending, you'll see us be receiving an award there, which is fantastic. And then lastly, I'm going to be turning this over to Paul Matthews for the Safety Minute and Departmental Report. And Paul, take it away.
Thank you, Tom. President Bagnall, Commissioners. Turn on the projector here. Feels like spring is in the air. If you go to our house, you'll see some daffodils starting to bloom. I know it's not technically spring till the middle of March, but we're getting ready for that. And so I thought it'd be an opportunity to talk about some of the hazards that there are springs here in Oregon. Operating lawnmowers and other outdoor jobs. Some suggestions there. First of all, wear safety goggles, sturdy shoes, and long pants. You want to protect yourself. Follow all the warning labels for the lawn and garden equipment. Protect your hearing. Hearing protection can be very important. Ensure your equipment is working properly. Wear gloves to protect your skin from irritation, cuts, as well as contaminants from various chemicals you might be using. Use insect repellent containing DEET. I'm not sure in Oregon that's a big deal, but it's on the list of things that I had found in this preparing the safety amendment. Reduce risk of sunburns and skin cancer. You know, as we hit March and April, the sun's rays are actually fairly direct as much as they would be in the fall, so take that into account. Keep an eye on the thermometer too. As it gets warmer, you can suffer from heat injuries. Not a problem for several months, but these are the things we can start worrying about right now if that's something we want to do. With that, I'll transition into the department report itself. And tonight, the department report is somewhat unusual. Normally, we talk about what we do within our department. We highlight an activity within the department to the board. And you might remember the last time I gave a department report, I actually talked about the reorganization we've done in the finance department as we prepare for the changes that are coming with the Willamette water supply system and so forth. But tonight, I'm going to turn it around, take a different tack. Actually, I'm going to talk about revenues. And we've been providing in the month in review an update on our forecast of revenues. This would be an opportunity to speak directly to the board about some of the revenue challenges that we're seeing. And first, I'd like to just convey a few facts. Each month, we look at the district's financial performance, as you might expect, and we anticipate changes that we're facing. This summer's cooler and wetter weather reduced our water sales revenues. When we talk about water sales revenues, we're talking about the volume charges as well as the fixed charges. So looking as of January 31st, the latest numbers we have, we are forecasting a fiscal year-end unfavorable variance of between $4 and $4.5 million. So right now we're down about $3.2 million, but we're looking ahead and seeing how that trend will affect us and looking at $4 to $4.5 million. And again, this includes charges for both the volume charges as well as the fixed charges. The estimated cause of the softness in revenue is actually surprisingly difficult to figure out. We've got a lot of moving parts that are happening at the same time, and it makes it difficult. Just to kind of provide some additional facts, we're estimating a shortfall about 5.7% overall in water sales revenues. That's the fixed and variable charge together. In July alone, we had water sales revenues that were 18.7% lower than what we had planned. And some of that variance is due to the district's two-block rate structure. So we have higher margin on that Block 2 revenue, and that was part of it for July and August. But one of the things that complicates this is the district's bi-monthly billing cycle. So when water sales are low in one period, it takes a while for that to be realized, both in subsequent bills as well as the interplay with those blocks and the different rates that are charged with those block cycles. To further complicate it, we forecast that with the impact that the withdrawal of Beaverton customers would have on the district, and we did that by looking at the accounts, the store consumption by those accounts, and looked at how that would affect us in the future. We think that is an accurate estimate. We had the accounts, we used the GIS system to identify them. But we're still looking at that and seeing could that be part of why the revenues are down. In talking to my colleagues in other water utilities, they are facing the same thing. So this is a year in which these kinds of things are happening. One other thing to keep in mind is that these revenue shortfalls actually can come in cycles. And so the district in the, maybe President Bagnall will remember, in the first decade of this millennium had a period of time where revenues were down and rate increases, in fact, didn't generate a lot more revenue. Those cycles can last 3 to 5 years, depending on the situation. They can be driven by weather and other factors. All those things moving together leave us where we are. So regardless of the cause of these things, we will be updating the district's financial plan and incorporate the effects of the fund balances, because our cash fund balance will be a little bit lower, and as well as taking into account the capital improvements plan. So we'll be doing all that, and we'll present that to the board in the late spring timeframe as we originally planned. All this information I'm about to present to you is in the month in review, but I thought I would just highlight some of the key facts. So on the volume water sales, you can see July really set us back, but we haven't gotten picked up had a favorable variance since that time. The fixed charges, we were doing fairly well. Now the scale is different. We're talking hundreds of thousands versus millions of dollars. But in January, we actually had an unfavorable variance in the fixed charges, and that in the forecast I've been talking to you in past months, I'd assume that a continuation of this favorable variance might offset some of our volume revenue sales. That's why we went from an estimate of the $3 to $3.5 million to now the $4 to $4.5 million number. When you look at the cumulative water sales, this is a graph that depicts it. We really aren't that far off. As I said, right now, we're about $3 million, but we're trying to forecast what that will be over time. By the time we get to the end of this fiscal year, we're assuming that that could be as much as $4 to $4.5 million. But there is some good news, and the good news is on the SDC front. SDCs are $1.75 million favorable variance, meaning that we are collecting that growth-related cost. That's very good news. Obviously, that revenue can be used for paying for growth-related capital improvements. But the other thing is it's an indicator that future rates from these ratepayers will be available to fund the district's capital needs. Caveat, though, is we always talk about STCs, we talk about the volatility of those things, and so what you see is a $1.75 million positive variance can flatten or next year actually be an unfavorable variance. One of the things that we look at is, are we covering our operating expenditures with our operating revenues? So we're looking at operating expenses within the district, excluding depreciation. We're looking at that water sales revenue. And the district still is covering those costs. Part of that is our operating expenses are being maintained below budget. But also, this is where we pick up that cash flow that we're using to fund our capital improvements. So we're still in good shape, but this is something that we want to watch very carefully because we need to have these positive variances to fund our capital improvements. So where are we? Water sales revenues are below plan. We do have a favorable variance in fixed charges, but as you saw this last month, it was an unfavorable variance. So we're not assuming that that will be available really to offset much of the volume revenue sales. But we only have 1 month of data. The favorable variance from operating budgets have offset some of the revenue losses to date, and no immediate action is required. We're not at the point right now that we're suggesting that any immediate action is required. Recommendation is we will continue to monitor revenue operating expenditures carefully. We'll update the financial forecast and present an updated financial plan to the board, probably in the May time frame. And again, no immediate action is recommended. With that, answer any questions that you may have. Question?
Thank you. And I do have one follow-up question for our CEO, though, which is, you notice the change here. Obviously, the lobby redesign is underway. How long do we expect that to last?
I'm going to let
really a Carrie question.
Yeah, I'm going to let Carrie answer that.
We think it's going to last about 2 months, and we should be done towards this. We should only have this arrangement as part of our board meeting for March and April. So is that about right? We'll be done by middle of April? I should have asked Colin to begin with.
Thank you. All right, turning to Commissioner communications and reports of meetings attended, why don't I start with Commissioner Sanders tonight?
On the 4th of the month, I attended our usual work session here with TVWD. And then on the 11th of the month, we had our now once every 4 months, 3 times a year, Willamette River Water Commission meeting. We heard from Joel that the Army Corps is moving forward with their plan on the allocation of the Willamette River, recognizing a more reasonable flow rate in the river. And I believe the numbers that they are allocating towards municipal and industrial use are in line with what our hopes are for the water district. I'm getting head shaking from council, so I think that's good. And then the 13th through the 16th, along with yourselves and Commissioner Dugan and some of the staff here, I was at the SDAO conference in rainy, wet, windy Seaside, Oregon. It was nasty.
Thank you, Commissioner Schmidt.
Yes, on the 27th of January, I attended the Willamette Intake Facility meeting in Commissioner Doan's stead. And it consisted of various updates on a lot of things that needed to be addressed. And then on the 4th of February, I attended the work session, WWSS updates, paperless work session materials. And yeah, and then on the 14th, meeting with Tom and Bernice to discuss tonight's board agenda and then tonight's regular board.
Thank you. Commissioner Duggan.
I also attended the work session we had on February 4th, where we got an update on the WWSS project and discussion of having paperless meetings. On the 5th of February, I attended the Regional Water Providers Consortium Board meeting, which is our regularly 1/3 of the year meeting, where we talked about meeting logistics. The Metro Board room that we've met in since the beginning of the consortium is no longer going to be available to the consortium anymore. So if we wanted to keep the time of the meeting, we would either have to move up the time of the meeting to 6 p.m. and start at that time so we can get out of the meeting, or the option was to look at a meeting in the Portland building. There's a meeting room that's become available and would probably work for the consortium board meeting. It was the decision of the board to explore meeting at the Portland building with our regular time as opposed to try to move things up earlier in the evening. There are some extra expenses to moving to the Portland building, one of them being have to pay for a security guard. And there was concern that the cookies being provided might have to be cut in order to pay for the security guard, but fortunately staff was able to reassure the board that we could still have our cookies at the meeting. And I made the observation, channeling the wisdom of Benjamin Franklin, that those that are willing to sacrifice cookies for security deserve neither. That went over well with the people that were sitting right next to me, because I didn't say it very loud. But there was quite a bit of discussion on the fact that we enjoyed the desserts that are provided at the meeting. The other big agenda item for the night was to approve the budget for the next fiscal year. And there's a 4.5% increase in the budget, a number of different program changes and focus, nothing huge. What it does mean, though, is that we only have a 0.8% due increase. That's less than 1% due increase because of a $78,000 carryover that is anticipated. So even though they're increasing the budget by 4.5%, our dues will only increase by 0.8%. And then we had a great WIFIA presentation from Lee Lindsay at from the city of Hillsborough in their Office of Business and Administration. I also attended the Special Districts Association of Oregon Conference. It was very enlightening conference with a great keynote speaker, but yes, it was rather rainy and windy, and then tonight's meeting. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate the cookie commentary. Moving to Commissioner Doan.
Well, I just point out that Girl Scout cookies are on sale, and we could buy a bunch of them and put them in the freezer, and you could take them to the meetings of the Water Consortium. I will donate the first box. Okay.
That's very, very nice of you, but I think that these might go bad by the time that the next consortium. I can't guarantee their safety till the next consortium board
Well,
meeting.
I'll go with the not guarantee safety. My thought is they keep forever in the freezer.
Oh, Forgot about that option. I think I might leave this in the hands of staff so that they can best determine the disposition of these particular cookies.
We
But
can
thank
assure
you,
we'll
Jim.
take care of them.
Okay, well, enjoy. Okay, I attended the work session meeting on the 4th. I had a meeting with Tom on the 12th. I went to the Aloha Business Association meeting on the 13th and discussed a number of very interesting issues, a lot having to do with tweaks in the income tax that were retroactive. So you might want to look at the tweaks and look at your 2018 tax and see if you want to make some changes. Because there were some significant changes that were retroactive. And then, of course, tonight's meeting.
Thank you. I had many of the same meetings, except in addition to some of the others, I had a meeting on the 28th of January with the Joint Water Commission Executive Committee. We were there to discuss the ASR agreement with Beaverton and to talk about the Fernhill roof repair contract. Then we had the work session on the 4th of February with the WWSP budget and paperless meetings discussion. SDAO conference with ethics and legislative training that went the 7th through the 9th in rainy Seaside. On the 14th, I met with the CEO and the board vice president to do agenda planning. And then, of course, tonight's board meeting with regular district business. The commissioners, do the commissioners have any topics that they need to raise? Hearing none, we move to the public comment portion of the meeting. Public comment time is set aside for persons wishing to address the board on items on the consent agenda and matters not on the regular agenda. Additional public comment will also be invited on agenda items as they are presented. Do we have any persons who would like to comment tonight? All right. Seeing none, we move to the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are considered to be routine and may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Any board member may request that an item be removed by motion for discussion and separate action. Any items requested to be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion will be considered immediately after the board has approved those items that do not require separate discussion. We have two items on tonight's consent agenda. The first is to approve the January 15th, 2020 regular meeting minutes, and the second is to approve the February 4th, 2020 work session minutes.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. We have the unusual situation of having no items on the business agenda tonight, so we will move smoothly into the informational presentation on the proposed update to other service charges and penalties and the staff report from our CFO, Paul Matthews.
Good evening again, President Bagnall, Commissioners, and I will try to do this smoothly. This should be a fairly short presentation, which I think won't disappoint most of us here. Just by way of background, we did talk to the board at the prior work session about a schedule for updating various fees and charges of the district. And one of the ones we're going to immediately deal with were for the hydrant meter charges, and that's what I'm going to be talking about here tonight. So generally, the district adopts the rates and charges at its September regular board meeting, the first September of the biennium, and it's adopted by resolution. It's actually good for 2 years. That's been the practice since the recommendation from the Rate Advisory Committee to adopt those 2-year rate increases. We have an Exhibit A, which sets the water rates, and then we have Exhibit B, which has the other service charges and penalties. When the Rate Advisory Committee made the recommendation to have a 2-year rate increase, we broke what was one Exhibit A into both an Exhibit A and B so we could deal with them separately. So what we're talking about tonight is changes just to Exhibit A of the district's rates and charges. The proposed schedule that we have, first of all, tonight we'll give you an overview of the hydrant permit fees. I'll present that tonight, and then based on feedback that we get from you, consider adopting at your regular March meeting, and then have it effective date of May 1st. So what are we proposing to change with the hydrant permit fees? We're revising truck sizes to better reflect the usage of our customers. We had an outreach plan, an open house on January 30th of 2020 where we met with those interested. Actually, we had no one show up for the open house, but we did have an opportunity for people to come and talk about the proposed changes. And then, of course, we're going to have the proposal at tonight's meeting and adoption in March with the effective date of May 1st. So the fire hydrant fees the changes are to accommodate the larger truck sizes. We're going to adjust the 12-month fire permit fee per the revised truck size delineation. We added a 12-month permit and usage clause for clean water services to handle their needs, and we made some other minor changes to the labels and the items. The exhibit itself is presented here, the way it is currently, as well as the proposed changes. So you can see this was what we had before, and we're adding 12 months here, minor change, and then adding the additional truck sizes and the fees themselves. That's for the bulk of the customers. As it relates to clean water services, a couple things. First of all, Clean Water Services actually prefers to track their loads the way they're doing it now. They have an excellent history of reporting their loads to the district, and it doesn't cost us a lot of money to maintain that. So we're very comfortable working with them under the current approach that they have. So that would be a 12-month hydrant permit fee plus usage at the Block 1 rate would be the proposal for Clean Water Services. With that, I'm available to answer any questions that you might have or comments that you have, direction from the board, and we'll come back at the March regular meeting with a proposed resolution for adoption.
So just out of curiosity, did you have any customers who were confused since it didn't say 12-month permit? Did they think they were 2-year permits?
No, actually, because it didn't have a timeline, it was ambiguous as to whether or not it was. We used to have 6-month permits, 3 months, 6 months permits, and so we had to delineate that. No, this is 12 months, and you're going to be expected then to use the hydrant itself if you're going to not have one of those particular fees. So we had to put a timeline on that for the charge.
Was there any, there was nobody showing up to the open house, but was there any other inquiries about the change from some of our people in the contracting business, large firms that are doing big projects?
Yeah, Carrie's team reached out to those folks because this is their hand, so I'll let her
Yeah,
answer.
so we've been communicating with the users of this particular program for quite some time, and they knew the changes were coming. They didn't know the specific numbers associated with the change that you're seeing tonight, and we actually provided them with the changes as part of the outreach. So we knew that, people are busy and they don't necessarily have time to come to the district on a regular basis. So we reached out to individual users of this program in the past and provided them with what we were proposing to present to you tonight. And so they had all the information, and perhaps, their assessment was just not big enough of a change for them to make their way down here. So that's the only assumptions that we have, but I sat here very lonely for about 45 minutes and decided to take off after that. So we didn't have any inquiries.
You probably got all the cookies, though.
There were cookies. I did not eat it because I was being really good.
It looks like that's all we have. So thank you very much. And there being no further business before the Board of Commissioners, this meeting is adjourned.